What we're doing this morning, we're at a small lake, and it's a lake I've been to a lot of times, but I've not been in a while. So it's early spring. The water's about a little over 60 degrees, but we've had a cold snap last week, so what we're trying to do is figure out if the fish are still pre-spawn and up and chasing. So I'm working a faster moving bait first thing this morning. It's called a super fluke. It imitates a shad, and there's some shad in this lake. And so for about the first 30 minutes, that's what we're going to do. We're going to search. If we don't get bit doing that, we're going to slow down and fish some baits, some slower moving baits, to see if these fish might already be on the bed. And hopefully we'll have a good day. It's perfect weather. It's about 62 degrees outside, going to get about 80 today. Light wind, ought to be a great day for fishing. We started the morning with one of my favorite baits. It's called a Zoom Super Fluke, and it's a pearl color. And it didn't take us very long before we connected with our first fish. There's one. He was way out off the bank. Pretty good one too. I'm noticing some shad on my depth finder. I think some of these fish may still be out following the shad, not up shallow yet. He's not a giant, but he's a nice one to start with. He choked it too. Oh, we'll call that the the Royce easy release method. But that fish was about 15-20 feet off the bank, and we talked about this the other day. He never really thumped it hard. I pulled once, and then when I picked back up, there was just some pressure. There's no stumps, logs, anything down there, so if there's pressure there, it's a fish. I didn't quite set the hook hard enough on him, so let's see if we can get us another one. Basically on this bait, unless I'm seeing fish actively chasing, I'm jerking it a couple times and letting it sit, jerking it a couple times and letting it sit. And usually they hit it on the stop, and you have to be ready for that. This lake, the watercolor would be good for something like a spinnerbait, but it's so calm this morning, I decided to go with a bait that's a little bit more subtle. If the wind gets up a little bit, we may go with that spinnerbait. This time of year can be a little tricky, because in the south where we live, they can spawn as early as mid-February and as late as usually April. And if you haven't been, it just takes you a little while to figure them out. And that's probably what's going to happen with us today. When we put the boat in, I did see a fish already on a bed, so I know they've at least started here. What we got to figure out is if they're just starting, or if they're in the middle of it, or if they're just finishing. There's a fish. Oh, he's coming right at me, running straight at me, running straight at me. Can't catch up with him. There he came on. Boy, it's hard to, when those fish hit it and run straight at you, it is hard to catch up with them. Tell you what I'm going to do. What I've done today, I put a big hook in this thing, but they're biting funny. You can see it covers almost the whole length. It's a 5/0 hook. The problem with it is it's a much thicker wire, so I think I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of size for a thinner wire. I'm going to go and put a 4/0 hook on and see if I hook up with more fish. I've lost 2 this morning already. What I did, I just downsized my hook one size on this fluke because I was missing fish. And so what I think was happening was the hook diameter is a little too thick. So I went to a 4/0 instead of a 3/0. Instead of a 5/0 or 5/0. I don't think I sacrificed much size. So I'm just going to tie this on real quick. I'm tying a real simple knot called an improved clinch knot. And you got to have 3 hands to tie it. So this is my 3rd hand. Just pull all the sides tight at the same time. Cinch it tight, make sure it doesn't slip. Cut off the tag end. So what I do, there's a side with the slit. You come in that side. I'm going to cut this little end off. Come in that side about 1/4 inch and come out. Then I push my hook all the way through and let it fall under the hook and push it all the way over the crook so that the hook eye doesn't show at all. And then what you want to do is to make it where the hook is laying straight on the back. So I look where it's going to go through, curl it up and poke it through the bait at that point. And then it should just be laying straight on the back like that, and the bait is straight. And then to keep it weedless, I just back it up a little bit and skin hook it right there. That way if it comes across some stuff, it's relatively weedless and it's straight, and that's what you want. If it's doing that helicopter in the water, it's not very straight. You want it just to move like an injured bait fish. We're at this small lake and they've got automatic feeders, and the feeder just went off and the brim went crazy, and a blue heron came and got him about an 8-inch brim. And then I just saw 2 big nice bass blow up in here. And we got a crazy bunch of turkeys in the background over here. We're just seeing the Lord's creation all over the place this morning. What I usually do with this fluke, as soon as it hits the water, I'll give it 5 or 6 quick jerks in case there's a fish right on the bank and they'll react to it. And then if they haven't hit it by that point, that's when I slow it down. A couple of jerks, let it sink a foot, a couple of jerks, let it sink a foot. There's one. I got him. Pretty good one too. He was up there eating on brim. We threw that fluke up there. And he came off. I don't know what's going on with my stuff coming off. The hook's really sharp. I think these fish there's so many of them up there, they're coming straight at me and I'm not getting a good hook in them. But when you see fish coming up like this, you can throw a crankbait through there, but this fluke, I can leave it in the strike zone longer. So that's why I was throwing the crankbait. I threw it 2 or 3 times, didn't get bit. And about the 2nd or 3rd cast with the fluke, I had one on. It came off. I don't know if I'm not doing a good job setting the hook or if they're just coming straight at me, but we're gonna catch the next one. Hang on, I got one right here. There he is. You stay on, you big son of a gun. This feels like a little better fish right here. They're just up there around those brim. And like I said, I'm gonna he's over here. Can't quite tell how big he is yet. He feels like a good one. Sometimes they feel bigger than they are. In this lake, they pull really hard. But I think it's a good one. I'm using 10-pound line. So if you see me kind of babying the fish, that's why. And I like to get the fun out of them. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I also don't always trust the drag on a reel, so I'll click my reel over and back reel if I got it. He's coming up. And yeah, that's a good one right there. He was just up there about 10 feet off the bank. I'm sure they're in there eating those brim that are up there. I shouldn't say he, it's probably a she, as big as this fish is. Come here, girl. See what you look like in the boat. Nice. And you can see that time it hooked it just like it's supposed to. Right in the top lip. Looks like it's either full of eggs or full of brim. Very healthy fish. We'll let her go and lay her eggs. We kind of just happened upon this other feeder. You can see the brim going crazy out here. We're gonna see if there might be a few bass come up here and seize the opportunity to get an easy meal. The fish right up there, that was not a brim. See if I can get him to react to this. I actually had those blue herons try to eat this fluke before. There's a fish. Oh, he let go. There he is. Oh, come on, buddy. Stay hooked up. Up there eating brim. Pretty good one. These fish are out off the bank, but this one, I saw him right up on the bank. And I could tell that swirl wasn't a brim. So he's trying to eat some. He's a little bit skinny, but they're all really pretty. Now that fluke did exactly what it's supposed to do. What you want it to do is slide up the line like that and get away from the hook. Most of the times when you lose a fish on a fluke, that's why it balls up on the hook. I had to work with that fish because it was hooked, so I'm gonna make sure with these extra wide gaps, if the point is straight in line with the eye, that's what you want. If it's been open or been in, you want to take your pliers and hook it back. Let's see if we can catch us another one right quick right here. There's a fish. Oh, it came off. Now you see that? I lost that fish. Remember me just telling you, when they slide up the line, that's what they're supposed to do. This fluke, for some reason, balled up on the hook, and I did not get a good hook set. What I may have done is skin hooked it too far. So I'm gonna back that hook back out and just barely skin hook it. And hopefully that won't happen again. You always need to be aware of what your bait is doing, particularly when you're fishing with soft plastics. You want to make sure that it's rigged properly, or make sure if you've caught a couple of fish on it that it's not torn badly. Because if you don't do that, you will lose fish. A lot of people would, especially when you're bass fishing, would ask the question, you know, how long do you stay in a spot when you catch a fish? And like right now, what I would typically do is, these fish are chasing other fish. So I would stay on this particular spot until I had been without a bite for probably 10 or 15 minutes. And it varies with the kind of fishing you're doing. Like if we're going down this bank and I catch a fish next to a stump, well, I'm not gonna stay next to that stump for 10 or 15 more minutes. But on like a point, or if I'm fishing a deep water spot where there could be a group of fish, I'm gonna be thoroughly convinced there's no more there, they won't bite before I leave it. Typically 10, 15 to 30 minutes on a spot after I've caught a fish, unless I'm just fishing down a bank. There's not a lot of places you go to fish public waters that there's a feeder like these have been today, but the same principle applies. You know, you've got in your mind, I'm gonna fish a certain way, I'm gonna catch them a certain way. But if you see a bass run up and blow up on a brim, chase a shad, you know, you see just any kind of a splash or that looks like it's a bass, you should always be situationally aware and go throw at that fish and throw multiple times, because what may have happened is that fish may have blown up on something and missed it. And if you throw back in there with a bait, they may think it's the same bait that they hit and killed but didn't eat it. There's a fish. This is a little one. That one may be a keeper. That fish actually came up on top and blew up on it. And he hit it good. One of the things that you learn about fishing when you do it a lot is the only thing that's consistent is it's inconsistent. It changes all the time. And that's kind of what happened on this particular day. We went to this lake expecting to catch them a certain way on flukes. And we caught a few, but it didn't seem to work really well. And then I thought I'd catch them a different way, and we'd catch a couple and it didn't work really well. It just seemed like it was kind of all over the map, that everything changed. You know, we kind of finally figured it out, but that was kind of the deal of the day. It was just everything was changing, everything was different, nothing was consistent. And if you fish a lot, you find that. I fished a tournament one time on a lake over in Alabama called Pickwick, and we started out the day, it was in March, and it was about 63 or 4 degrees. And by the time we came into the end of the day, it was 31 degrees and snowing. So things are always changing. And you know, our lives are a lot like that too. Your life's all over the map. If you got kids, you're taking them all over the place. You never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. Things could be good one day, things could be bad the next day, and things are just kind of all over the place. And so one of the things that I've figured out in my life is, man, I need a center. I need something steady. I need something that's not ever going to change. And what I figured out a long time ago is that's Jesus Christ. And in the Bible, in the book of Hebrews, it spells it out really, really simply. It's Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8, and it says this: Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And that's really what I base my life on. You know, you can try to base your life on a lot of things. People base it on friendships or on their marriage and those things are good. But what you have to have is something that's steady, every day, the same. And what that tells you is that all the characteristics of Christ are the same, yesterday, today, and forever, and you can count on Him. His peace is the same, His hope is the same, His joy is the same, His salvation is the same, yesterday, today, and forever. And you can base your whole life on that, and you can count on Him to bring you through whatever goes on, to make your joys better. And if you don't have a relationship with Him, if you don't have something to base that on, it's just as simple as asking Him to forgive you of your sins and ask Him to come and live in your heart. And so that can be the center of your life, is that Jesus Christ is the same, yesterday, today, and forever. And you can always count on that. We've been fishing most of the morning with faster moving baits, and we picked up a few fish. But I feel like the majority of these fish are moving up, getting ready to spawn, so we're going to slow down. We're going to fish a little bait. It's a crawfish imitation. It's called a speed crawl. We're going down this bank, and a lot of times, and it's usually more after the spawn, but a lot of times if you see a bank like this and there's sun and shade, typically they're going to like the shade better. And then if you come down a bank, if everything's in the sun, if you see a stump or a tree that's blown down in the water or a rock, you always want to fish the shady side of it, because that's typically where those fish are going to hang out. It's not quite so important during the spawn, because they're going to spawn wherever, but that's pretty important, particularly if you're bank fishing. We live on a pond. There's not a lot of cover on the pond. And I had a student fishing there one day, and he fished all the way around the pond and didn't get a bite till he got to the very back. There's one tree, and there was a shadow of the tree in the water. And he caught 6 or 7 bass in the shadow of that tree. A lot of times people throw terms around in fishing, cover, structure, and people get confused about it. But if you remember it this way, cover, it's like the cover on your bed is something you get under. That's what cover is. Cover is a stump, a tree, rocks, things like that fish can get under, get around, hide, ambush, bait. Structure is more like a drop, like if you're fishing and the water breaks from 2 foot to 4 foot, or there's a creek channel, something like that. That's what structure is, something that's naturally occurring in the lake. So when you hear people talking about cover and structure, that's the difference. I fished with the Zoom speed crawl for a little while, and that didn't seem to be working very well. And what I realized is the time of year these fish might have been on the bed. And so I really like to throw a 6-inch June bug lizard into beds. It's a great bait for bed fishing. This color water, you couldn't really see the beds, but we could see the fish moving up there. And so I rigged it up Texas rig and I pitched it into some beds, and that's how we started fishing after that. Got a fish we're working on here. I reeled in a lizard and he chased it up. Then I threw back in there where he was and he just kind of pecked it. So he may be on a bed right there. There he is. He let it go. He got it again. Yep. What in the world? Crazy fish. I thought he was a shad at first. He was so light colored. Look at that. I really do think that fish was on a bed, because twice he wouldn't eat it, and then the third time, look how he choked it. He's trying to kill it. I don't know if this made the difference, but we fished hard, and I put on a lizard, and about the third cast I caught one. It's basically a 6-inch lizard, June bug color. And I'm rigging it the same way I rigged all those other things. Come in the head, come out 1/4 of an inch, push it over the eye, and then I bring it all the way through the back, and then I skin hook it on the back. The most important thing about every one of these baits, the fluke, the crawl, the lizard, any kind of bait you use, you want it to be straight. If it's doing cartwheels in the water, that doesn't look natural. And you want it to look natural. There's a fish. He's still on. Yep. They are running at me. That's a better one right there. That may have been the female off the same bed. Boy, these fish, it's amazing. They're hitting it. And when I set the hook, they're 10 feet to the left, to the right. That one was in a similar vicinity of that little one I caught. But this one's a much better fish. See if we can't get her in the boat. Come here, biggin. Come here. Yeah, that's more like it. Come here. Look at that. Wow. That one's hooked just like it's supposed to be. A lot of these fish have been hitting it funny and getting hooked funny, but he was hooked right through the top. You can see this is a sign of a healthy fish too, when they're really wide across the back like that. And thick through the belly too. These fish will be spawning here in the next week or two. May already be. We're gonna let her go do it. Thank you, Lord. Alex and I were just talking about it. Sometimes a subtle difference is a big difference. And we fished the crawl and fished the crawl and fished the crawl, and they just didn't want to hit it. And now in the first 5 minutes of fishing the lizard, we've gotten 2 fish. And I think I said this to you earlier, when they tear, when the head of them gets torn or the body gets real torn, like this one is, you want to put a fresh bait on. With a stump just under the water. It's just this side of it. See if he wants another purple worm. This color I'm using is called June bug. It's a purple with a green flake. It's a great color when the water's a little bit dingy. Not muddy, but dingy like we've got it today. About 1.5 to 2 foot visibility. Trying to make the exact cast I made a minute ago when I caught that fish, or had that fish on. Scat back! Skip! Get! So we've been here most of the morning. It's about lunchtime, about noon. And it's pretty hard to establish any kind of a pattern. We've caught 2 or 3 on a fluke, 2 or 3 on one on a crankbait, a couple on a speed crawl. Went to this lizard and thought that was going to be the key. Caught 2 real quick on it, and I haven't gotten a bite since. So what we're doing now And it is a hard time of the year to pattern fish. We're kind of reevaluating what we're going to do next, and you know, hopefully the fish will just start biting. If they don't, I'm probably going to go out and try deeper to see if we can find some fish. I know every fish in the lake probably isn't up shallow yet. There he is. Yep. Running at me, can't catch up with it. Nice one. Nice. Boy, I just knew there had to be one living in there somewhere. Won't bother him enough till he bites me. Come here, babe. I don't want to come in. Look at that. Boy, I just barely had him hooked in the top of the mouth too. Look at that. So but that's what's cool about these really sharp hooks. It's a gamakatsu. If they can catch them, they're gonna. In this place, there's some wood and some rock, and I just felt like there was a fish there, and we fished it through and through and through. Still no red on the tail, but the fish is clearly fat, getting ready to spawn, so we'll let her do that. Thank you. Just a real simple setup. And what we're finding today, and I've had days like this before, the pattern is no pattern. You fish and you fish everywhere you can, and you fish hard, and hopefully you get a bite and capitalize on the bites that you get, and that's what we've tried to do. So we're going to just keep fishing. Hey, thanks so much for being with us this week. We had a great day, shared a lot of information with you about the techniques we were using catching these fish. In fact, there was so much information in this show, we decided to make this a two-part show where you could see what fishing a whole day on the water and trying to figure out a pattern was like. So thanks for being with us today, but make sure you come back next week for part 2.